Okay, we're on again, apparently. I hope that we won't have any more technical hitches. So first of all, I want to check out whether are there any questions come up so far? Okay.
But I'm not sure they heard you so far.
Let me repeat, just in case it didn't come through, what I said before. The objective of these talks are to address all your questions on freediving. And we hope we can answer all of them and be of help to you. One thing that we cannot do, and that is put together individual training programs for you. It's not because we don't want to give away secrets. It's very simply that in order to do that, I would have to know you personally, know where you're at, what's stopping you, what your immediate challenges are for getting to the next level. Then we would have to sit down and work out a strategy of how to go forward, and then finally do it. General training programs are not usually that effective. A training program that is tailored for you and for your particular challenges is obviously far superior. So there will be some things that I can't discuss. Others I'll be very happy to discuss with you. If you have any doubt, ask the question anyway, and you'll get some kind of an answer from me, that I promise you. Today, until we have questions coming in, we're going to talk about concerns that concern people during this particular period of the year. For an awful lot of people, it's cold. Probably the last thing in your mind is to get into the sea, unless you're a fisherman, a spear fisherman. So the one thing that is important is that we try and prepare ourselves for the coming season when we can free dive. Now there are a lot of things that we can work on, both dry and if we have access to a swimming pool, of course that's very good as well. Dry training. Let's look at the various areas of dry training that are very, very important for everybody. The first area is, above everything else, flexibility. This is something that can be worked on during this season, and it's very, very important. Lung stretching exercises, stretching the neck so that the trachea is flexible, is going to be a tremendous benefit to us, particularly for the deeper divers. One of the things that we see in freediving competition nowadays is we see an awful lot of, we can call them accidents, which are actually trachea squeezes. They're often referred to as lung squeezes. They're not lung, they're trachea. And but they're nevertheless something that can limit your freediving, and not permanently, but it can certainly mess up a competition for you if you have it, and they do have an element of danger in them. So in order to avoid this, the trachea is actually your piping here, connecting the mouth, the nose to the lung, and it is not that flexible. We can make it more flexible by manipulating the neck. So exercises for the neck are essential for preparing you for the coming season. Now, some of them are incredibly simple at first. Simply moving the head up and then down so that the notch of the chin falls into the little depression here at the base of the throat. And you do that 8 times. But enjoy it like a cat stretching. Ooh, that feels nice. Do it slowly. Always do it consciously. Never do anything like a robot. Then moving the head from side to side, but move the eyes with it and try and look behind you over your shoulder. Keep the shoulders straight to the front and the other side. That's one round. Do 8 of those, and then simply what we call the Indian yes, where the head is just going over to the side, gently, gently, smoothly. Enjoy it. And then finally, circles with the head. Eight times, everything 8 times, and then the other way 8 times. Now the thing is this, nearly all your back problems begin with the neck. So if you are stretching the neck and making it more flexible, you're also avoiding an awful lot, or helping to avoid, back problems that may be incurred by people with bad posture sitting in front of computer screens for long hours. Whatever happens, even if you haven't got posture problems, most of us have stiff upper backs. If you watch people doing back bends, you'll notice that an awful lot of people have good bends, a good bending in the lower part of the back. They have almost hyperfective flexibility there. And the upper part of the back, from just between the shoulder blade, just underneath the shoulder blades, to the base of the neck here, you'll see that they're absolute boards. They have no flexibility in it. This is an area that's critical for monofinners, particularly. Shoulders, which in men tend to become very, very stiff, also very important for monofinners, and also important for people doing free immersion, where you're coming up, reaching, the hand reaches at full extent here, and then you raise the shoulder to get another few centimeters, and you're pulling down in front of the face. The hand passes very close in front of the face here, so that you're slipstreaming and pushing less water. Of course, if you're doing this kind of thing, to reach up and pull, you're creating an awful lot of resistance for yourself. So we come up close to the face, reach up, reach, and pull. Our hands tend to cross, very low down, at about the belt buckle level. Other exercises. A very important one is called udayana bandha. It's a yogic exercise, and it's superb for diaphragmic flexibility. Can we send a link over this? So we'll send a link to Maria Teresa doing it, my ex-wife. This will be the best demonstration that you can have of udayana bandha. It is basically bending forward from the waist with the knees unlocked, let's say the knees very slightly bent, your hands just above the knees on the thighs, with the thumbs on the outside of the thighs and the fingers on the inside of the thighs. If you reverse it, you tend to raise the shoulders, which we don't want. So you're bent down, this opens the chest, we let out all our air, and then we lift the stomach in and up, lifting the diaphragm up. It's not tensing the stomach muscles. It's moving the stomach muscles in the direction of the backbone and lifting up. There are tables for doing this exercise. We begin, it's a very strong exercise, and we begin with only 5 repetitions of this, which should be done daily. And it lifts the diaphragm, and it gives us certain other advantages, which is that we are holding our breath on maximum, absolute maximum exhale. A safety precaution for this exercise: first of all, do not do it after eating. This has to be on a completely empty stomach. It should be done first thing in the morning after you've been to the bathroom. The chin should come into the notch in the neck, and that's to stop a rush of blood going up to the head, because when you're lifting the diaphragm, you're moving blood up towards the head. You hold it, the first one, until the first feeling of discomfort. And then the second and third repetitions and more repetitions, you hold it for a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And only do 5 of them at the beginning. We gradually work up to 10, and then we start doing what are called flicks, where you lift the diaphragm and then push the stomach out. Lift the diaphragm and push the stomach out. And we can do up to 10 flicks. And we might do 5 repetitions of that and 5 of the holds. This is for several weeks down the line, until we're doing 10 repetitions of flicks only. This is for conditioning the flexibility of the diaphragm. It also increases the flexibility of the intercostal muscles, and this gives us a huge advantage in the water. First of all, one of the things that can stop us at depth is the fact that we tense up in this area. We have pressure sensors in the chest that respond to how much you're being squeezed. Now, at a certain point, they say, hey, stop, that's enough. This we call a pressure trigger point. And you can watch people who haven't got a depth gauge on, there's no marks on the rope, and they will stop every time at exactly the same point, at exactly the same depth, within 20 centimeters. It's amazing. And this is usually created by not having sufficient flexibility in the thoracic cage. A very important thing. We also can do, in 4 meters of water, empty lung exercises. There are tables for this one, and this is also an incredibly important part of training thoracic flexibility and also equalization at depth. So we know that equalization will not stop us. In another talk, or when I have questions on it, we will talk about the whole subject of equalization, which is one of the things that stop most people. It's the hardest thing for an instructor to teach, because a lot of the things you can't see. We have evolved a very good system for overcoming these difficulties, and most people who struggle with Frenzel, something like 90-something%, we send home very happy immediately. It's a series of exercises. If any of you know the written exercises that are all over the internet, I think they were designed by Eric Fatter, and he calls them the Fatter-Frenzel maneuver. They're very complex, they're ponderous, and they're well written, but we actually use practical exercises as opposed to written exercises that you can monitor yourself and see your own progress with. And then there's the kind of checklist that you do to make sure that you're not making one of the classic mistakes. One of the classic mistakes, I'm talking very briefly about a lot of subjects here. One of the classic mistakes that prevents you doing a Frenzel is going down with your head back, looking at the bottom when you're going down the line. That makes equalization incredibly difficult, and is a very non-recommended thing to do. The back of your skull here, you have something called the foramen magnum, which is a hole in the skull, through which pass the whole of the central nervous system, which is going up to the medulla and the pons in the brain. That's part of the brain that looks after all your housekeeping, all the things that you don't consciously control. Your heartbeat, your body temperature, glandular secretion, everything that goes on in the body that you're not actually consciously controlling. That's all done by the medulla and pons. And the central nervous system, the vagus and parasympathetic nerves, pass through the foramen magnum to this part of the brain. Now, if you can imagine, I have a ring, and I have these two nerves passing through it. If I cant the ring, I'm putting pressure on the nerves. That's not what you want to do when you're coming up or when you're going down. It can at the very least cause you blackout. So it's a bad idea from that point of view. It's a bad idea from the equalization point of view, but I'm only addressing it at the moment from the point of view of equalization. It vastly complicates the equalization, and usually people who are looking at the bottom swallow their air. So that leads me to the next thing. If you haven't got air in your mouth, you can't do a Frenzel. So if you think that your tongue movement is correct, then what happens is very simple, and if it's still not working for you, check that your head is in the correct position, straight or even with the chin a bit down. Check that you're not swallowing your air, which is a big no-no, because you won't be able to do a correct Frenzel with that. And these are some of the main, these are two of the main faults that prevent us if everything else is correct. Now, I'm going to talk a little about how we analyze whether a person is doing a correct Frenzel technique or not. Now, the first thing is that any movement of the diaphragm, you put your hand here on the base of the sternum and equalize. If you feel any movement here of the diaphragm, you're not doing a Frenzel. You're doing a Valsalva. I'll come back and explain why that's an incredibly bad idea. Let me go on with the explanation of the Frenzel. The Frenzel, you're using the back of the tongue to press against the soft palate at the back of the mouth, the top back of the mouth, because your eustachian tubes originate, if you like it, behind the soft palate there. And the soft palate acts like a kind of a diaphragm pushing air up the eustachian tubes into the middle ear, and that equalizes your ear at depth. I'm talking basically to people who have some idea of the physiology of the ear, and we can go into this in greater detail further down the line. So, how to decide whether you're doing a Frenzel or not? And to analyze that, there are three parts to the thing, three faults. If your tongue is not correct, if your tongue movement is not correct, it's not going to work, because you're using your tongue as a piston to push on the diaphragm, which is the soft palate, which is forcing air up into the eustachian tubes. So if the tongue isn't acting correctly, nothing's going to happen. If you haven't got air in your mouth, or if the head position is wrong, also it can fail, even if the tongue is acting correctly. Never, ever, ever force an equalization. A Frenzel can be incredibly gentle and very, very quick. If I see somebody going down in the water and holding on to an equalization and forcing it, I know very well that they're doing a Valsalva. I will explain why and how. Let me go on with your particular analysis of how you decide what you're doing. I said the first thing is, if you feel any movement here, you're doing a Valsalva. You're not doing a Frenzel. The next thing is, when you look for a Frenzel, look at somebody in a mirror, get them to block their nose just underneath here. Not here on the nostrils, but underneath, so you can see that just behind the nostril here is a little pocket, and that little pocket should swell when I equalize. Equally well, we can see under the throat, from the area from the Adam's apple, my screen is going off. Okay. From the Adam's apple, up here underneath the chin, we should see a movement of the Adam's apple and that particular area going up. If it goes down, bad news, we're sucking. We're not lifting the back of the tongue. We can see that because all these muscles are connected to the movement of the tongue. So we may be able to see that even with the camera as it is, raising slightly of the Adam's apple towards the area of the chin. Now, one of the other tests for the Frenzel is that you should be able to do a Frenzel with your mouth completely open. I don't mean doing this. I mean keeping the mouth open the whole time. You should be able to equalize. And feel your air, feel the air forcing your eardrums out. This is very important. What have we got here? Well, I need to put on glasses for that. I wish you'd read it for me. Okay, we've got a very nice message from one of our people that's come in. So this is one of the main ways of analyzing whether we're doing a correct Frenzel. Now, I promised to explain to you why the Valsalva is a bad idea. We're going to need a little bit of imagination here. I'm going to move a little bit back, and I hope you can see me. I'm going to move this a little bit down so that you may be able to see more of me. The base of my sternum is where the zip is going to be. When I'm going down in the water, look at the distance. I'll be upside down, yeah? And if I'm using my diaphragm, which is what you do if you're doing a Frenzel, if you're doing a Valsalva, you're pushing air up towards the ears using the diaphragm. Actually, you're pushing air down. That's the whole point. Because if I'm going down, imagine that that's the bottom. I'm going down. This, I'm having to push air from here to here. That's a good 60 centimeters. If I'm pushing that against water pressure, there comes a time when it gives out. And suddenly I find, hey, I can't equalize. This usually happens at anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 meters. And I notice that I'm having to exercise more and more force in order to equalize my ears as I go. This tells me, and it's taking longer and longer for the ears to equalize. This means I'm doing a Valsalva. Another way of checking it is if you go down a line, feet first, head up, and you're equalizing with a nose clip on, or having to pull with one hand, yeah, rather pull up, so you're pulling yourself down. You'll find that it's very much easier, and you can go an awful lot deeper. That's because the diaphragm is no longer working against the water pressures in order to move air up to your ears. Also, people who are working on scuba don't have a problem with whether it's Frenzel or Valsalva. It doesn't really matter, because what you're getting is you're getting compressed air. And it's rather like being able to equalize your ears on the surface, because the pressure inside and outside are equalized. So this is how we analyze what we're doing. Valsalva is a bad idea. We do not allow, even on the first course, people to go down using Valsalva. We try to correct it immediately. I know that Ada, I'm an Ada instructor trainer, and I shouldn't criticize Ada, but they make an attempt to criticize. They make an attempt to correct this at 3-star level. We do it straight away on the 2-star, because once somebody gets into a bad habit, it's much harder to correct. So we do it as soon as possible. Of course, the nightmare is fishermen who've been doing it wrong for an awfully long length of time. This is one of the reasons why we very much recommend the fishermen to go on a freediving course. With somebody who is capable of correcting these kind of problems. Not every instructor can. And so the best thing to do is to find out from ex-students of the instructor what their experience with them was, whether they succeeded in correcting a problem that they had or didn't, or whether the student went in without a problem in the beginning. But as with anything, if you've been doing it wrong for long enough, before you can learn the correct way of doing things and the efficient way of doing things, you have to unlearn. And this can be a very, very difficult process. So I do recommend that people go on freediving courses. You also learn one of the most important things, and that's how not to kill yourself. Freediving is, when it's done safely, one of the safest sports that exist. In competition, from our first competition, I think the first one was held in 98, if I'm right. Maybe there was one before that. First a major ADA competition, which was, I think it was the one that was held in Sardinia, if I'm correct. Since then, to the present day, there have been 0 fatalities in freediving competition. There are some disciplines, like no limits, which are not competition disciplines. That's a different story completely. We have lost people in training, and usually the answer is because they're training alone, without a partner. One of the saddest statistics that I know is the statistic that by far the most dangerous of all the different disciplines of freediving is static apnea, lying on the surface of the water in a face-down position, holding your breath for a maximum length of time. Now, here's another statistic for you. There have been no fatalities when there's been a partner present. When there has not been a partner present, there have been more fatalities in this. It's by far, statistically, it's by far the most dangerous discipline. There are areas of the world, like California, where an abnormal amount of people have swimming pools. They come back after work and think that they're going to relax, getting into the pool and doing a bit of free dive training. Wrong, wrong. First of all, don't do it alone, and secondly, do not do it after work. I'll come to why and where. If you notice, I'm having a bit of a ramble at the moment. I'm waiting for your questions to come in. So I'm covering a lot of subjects superficially, let's say. It's perhaps to give you an idea of specific questions that you might like to ask. So don't be afraid of the questions. We're not going to name who asked the question, but we're very, very happy to answer anything going in this. Let me go back to people who are coming back after work and practicing static apnea in their pools. If they do this alone, this is lethally dangerous. You can drift off, into a beautiful dream, and it's one that you will not wake up from. I lost tragically a very good friend a couple of years ago, who was one of the deepest divers in the world. He was the first man to pass 200 meters going down with a sled, and he died training alone in his swimming pool, alone in his own house. This is beyond tragic, leaving a young family, and this is something that never, ever, ever should have happened. Every year it does happen, and this is what I call something totally avoidable, because the statistics show that if you've got a partner, it's not going to happen to you. The partner is checking out your state of consciousness the entire time. Let me define what I mean by partner. A partner is not, I'm going to a swimming pool, I know the lifeguard who is called Johnny, and I ask Johnny to keep an eye on me. Sorry, no. Johnny is sitting down there, and his job is to scan the entire pool the whole time, to see what's going on, to see if people are behaving themselves, to see if they're swimming safely, to see if they're not doing things that might be offensive or interfere with other people. And he has also another habit, that if a young lady in a bikini goes by, Johnny's head turns. Now, he may, during that turn, and with his eyes diverted to another direction, he may miss the moment when you went down in the water and held your breath. Now, he knows that you hold your breath a very long time, and he doesn't want to interrupt you. You've had many days training, and all of them have been safe so far. So he doesn't interrupt you, and doesn't interrupt you, and doesn't interrupt you. By the time that he's woken up, hey, this is much longer than it should be, or than it has been, it may be too late. So first of all, to use the lifeguard is not fair on yourself, because he cannot be a partner. The partner has to be next door to you. He has to know the signs to look out for, and the partner has to be in arm's reach and totally devoted to you. Now, it's not fair on you to have somebody like that, because he's not a partner, and it's certainly not fair on him, because you're asking him to divert his attention from something that might be a potential accident in the pool. Wrong decision. So bring your partner and teach your partner the safety rules for static. And the safety rules for static are very, very simple. There are two things at the beginning, two major things, that the partner is looking out for. The first is, will you agree to exchange signals at certain times during a static? If you don't return a signal, he turns you over and rescues you. Now, the other thing which can occur between signals is a big release of air. If your partner sees a big release of air, I don't mean a tiny stream of bubbles, which might come from just a slightly leaky epiglottis or whatever, or it's air trapped in a mask that is badly fitting. A massive release of air, he does exactly the same thing. He turns you over and he goes through the whole rescue procedure, which is something that I very much recommend that your partner knows how to turn you over, knows how to rescue you, what to do. He cannot be a partner unless he knows this. This is another one of the things that we learn on a course. We learn all the safety precautions. An awful lot of them are not obvious to people. There's an awful lot of people on the North American continent that I've met, particularly underwater fishermen, who are still going down with a snorkel in their mouth and fail to realize the danger of this. A snorkel is a very deadly device if improperly used. Therefore, we will see that in freediving competitions today, except for the safety diver who must be looking down and seeing what's happening, enjoying your descent and preparing to go down to meet you, he's the only person who's even going to have a snorkel. Of course he'll remove it from his mouth before he dives down. Snorkel is an extremely bad idea from many points of view. One of the things is that you cannot equalize at depth with a snorkel in your mouth because you're required to have air in your mouth. And this, having the snorkel in it prevents this. You cannot be deep down and have your mouth open like that. The main thing is what happens when you come up to the surface. You have two choices. Well, three. The first choice is emptying the snorkel as you're approaching the surface, which means that you have to have your head back. We just discussed the fact that this is a very bad idea because of the foramen magnum at the back of the skull, and it's putting pressure on your central nervous system. We also discussed the idea that you're stretching your baroreceptors, which is not the best idea before you go up to the surface, and you're blowing out a certain amount of air into the snorkel, so that when you come up and you put your head down, the snorkel should be empty, and you would go on breathing from your snorkel. But you don't want to go breathing from your snorkel if you come out from a very deep dive. So today in freediving, we do not see any use of the snorkel at all, and certainly nobody taking it down underwater. As a matter of fact, if we look at movies, if I look back at movies in my archives of the first freediving competition, there were, I believe, 3 divers who went down with a snorkel in their mouth, and all 3 of them blacked out. Very, very bad idea. Now, to understand what's happening here, we have to understand that the other way of clearing a snorkel is blow the water out. Okay, if I blow the water out, what is in effect happening is that the pressure in my lungs is dropping drastically, and a sudden drop of pressure in the lungs means that the oxygen that's in saturation in the blood, which is my last reserve of oxygen, is going directly to the lung and not to the brain. The brain doesn't like this and says, hey, I'm not going to do without, hold it a minute please, I'm not going to do without oxygen. So I'm going to put a little bit of sanctions on you guys, meaning the rest of the body. And the brain's defense mechanism is blackout. That way it can ensure that the muscles, the organs, the nervous system, everything else are using much less oxygen, and you're not going to be moving. So there's the ticket with that one. Right, we have a question that's come in, and I want to address that. The person says there's some instructors that teach students to exhale about 5 meters before surfacing, coming up from a deep dive. Is it good to do that? I don't find a reason to do that, but can it be something useful? Okay, let me answer that one. Basically, the person has a good idea but a bad number. Can we go back to my picture, please? 5 meters, to do that from 5 meters up is both unnecessary and dangerous. I would say you need to be well trained to do this if you're going to do it that way. That has obviously got nothing to do with a snorkel. It's somebody coming up without a snorkel. And it does have certain advantages, but you do it from about 3 meters, no more than 3 meters to the surface. And you have to time it pretty damn well. The difficulty is really training somebody to do it. If you're coming up, you don't want to be coming up, particularly with your head back, looking for the surface. So you're usually, if you've got your head in this position, your indication of how close you are to the surface is gradually the light increases. So when you're diving in all the time in the same sea, you can train yourself pretty effectively to gauge where the 3 meter mark is, and you probably won't be more than a maximum of a meter out. However, if you're one day diving in the Red Sea and the next day diving in Greek waters, this might present a little bit of a problem to you. It has a big advantage in the fact that when you come up already, you can immediately inhale, yeah, and you have had a controlled exhalation before your first inhalation, which means that you haven't got a sudden fall of pressure in the lungs. It really means that after that there is not the same necessity for the first hook breath. The second and third breaths can be hook breath, but you've saved yourself one there, and it's actually something that I do all the time, and I've never had a problem with it. So my answer to your question is that if you think that you can train yourself reliably to do it, and you are at the level where you can gauge your distance from the surface, I think it's a good idea, and it works well for me. I would not try and do it from 5 meters. I would say 3 meters is the absolute limit for that. 3 meters gives you time for a controlled exhale, and at the same time you're not trying to do it too deep in the thing. But thank you for your question on that, and that's my answer to it. So we'll have a look at what where we're getting to. We've got another 10 minutes, so I'm going to go on rambling a little bit more. One of the main things that, of course, one of the main issues that we can all learn and profit by is rescue. There are so many things. I particularly want to address this because some of the worst people from a safety point of view are underwater fishermen. And so I'm going to be speaking quite a lot to them at this stage. The idea of the macho fisherman going out and fishing by himself as a solo act should have disappeared a long time ago. Every year we get fatalities, and every year the fatalities are because the partner has not had a partner, the diver has not had a partner, or that the partner has not been behaving as a partner should. I fished very deep, and I mean, I don't do it anymore because I'm living in Eilat, but up until a year ago I was in Baja California, And my wife Maria Teresa and myself used to fish very deep, and we used to do it safely because we had one person, one gun. One person up and one person down. And the safety diver was there immediately to help the other person. The gun was attached by a line from the butt of the gun or from the spear to the surface, to a float on the surface. It meant that you could go down, spear a fish, and forget the gun, leave the gun there. And if there was any question of working the fish up or anything else, the second person was there to help with that. It was far safer and much more enjoyable, much more relaxing, and actually we got much more fish. It was much more effective. There is nothing worse than the usual scenario where you go out together, your buddies, you go out fishing together, you get in the car, you get to the fishing area, and one goes this way and the other goes that way, and then after a certain length of time you realize that the other person is not coming out of the water. You haven't got a clue where he was last, you haven't got a clue where to look for him. And then you have the nice little experience of going back and explaining to his wife, his mother, or whatever, that he isn't coming home. And that's a task that I would not, I wouldn't wish on anybody. And it's one that you're not likely to get over for the rest of your life. Last year we lost a freediver in Israel, a spearfisherman in Israel. He apparently had a partner. The partner was asleep on a kayak, and somebody woke him up and said, where's your partner? He said, oh, he was just here a little while ago, I didn't know where he is. That's been a year ago and he still hasn't come home. His body was found eventually. He was a young man with a young family, and this is absolutely tragic. If your partner is feeling unwell, it can happen. If your partner is feeling unwell and cannot go on being a partner for you, stop diving. Get out of the water. First of all, you don't know what's happened to him. The partner is feeling unwell. So, first of all, don't go on diving. And the next thing, I mean, there's no such thing of I'm just going to doze off on the kayak. It means if I'm in the condition where I really have to do that, this is the end of the diving for us for today. Now get out of the water. This is 2020 hindsight. But this kind of scenario happens time after time after time. When will we learn? 2 people, 1 gun is the way to fish. Now, the only problem, and I realize that this is a problem, is for the people who are fishing very shallow. Because if you have 2 people on the surface and they're only fishing in 5 or 6 or 7 meters water, another person on the surface can be disturbing the fish. What I recommend then is that the partner, it's only a question of organization. There's no excuse for not working with a partner. Hey, it's my turn to dive. I'm going to go 10 meters in front. You're going to notice where I go down. And then after I've gone down, a few seconds after I've gone down, you're going to take my place on the surface, and if I'm in 5 or 6 or 7 meters, you should be able to see me. If you can't, yeah, then you know what your partner's capabilities are, and you know at least an area to go looking for it. And it's not ideal, but it's a lot safer than what's happening now. I understand that if he's right beside you the whole time, at arm's reach, he may be frightening fish, because movement on the surface like that can well do it if fish is down at 5 or 6 meters. But if he's behind you and you work in that system together, one down, one approaching, yeah, after he's come down, and then trying to see. You can even do something else. You can have a float attached to the back of the gun there, again, yeah, line going up to the surface to a float. If there's a risk of entanglement in rocks, tough. Very tough. It's a lot better, yeah, than losing a diver due to bad visibility. You just have to learn how to manage that one. If we can bring safety even into spearfishing. But hey, none of this is any good unless you learn the techniques, you know, of rescuing somebody, bringing them to the surface, and how to act correctly on the surface. And this is another one of the things that we do even in the first course, and we practice it. Now here's another idea for you. We're all out there, if we're spear fishermen, wanting to jump into the water straight away, and at the end of the day we're far too tired, yeah, to practice rescue skills. But hey, is this important to you or isn't it? It's a skill, but if we don't hone it, and if we don't practice it together, important aspect of staying alive underwater. We will later on in different talks talk about safety for freedivers. We'll talk about systems like how to make your own counterweight, your counterweight system.